What is something scary that has happened to you that you cannot explain rationally? Unfiltered Confessions, voiced by William Bennett. When I was 6 years old, I had a cat named Buster. Buster was actually my stepdad's cat, but because I never had a cat before, I claimed him as my own. Suffice to say, Buster didn't like being hugged and cuddled all the time by a little child, so he hated me. He avoided me at all costs. He was also an outdoor cat, so he would often spend most days outside and then come in for the night. One night, Buster didn't come back to the house. We usually fed him at night, so I was worried. Our area was also well known for an abundance of coyotes. My parents were being a bit hush-hush about Buster's disappearance, but I didn't get the hint. That night, when I was drifting off to sleep, Buster jumped onto my bed. He laid down by my head and let me pet him until I fell asleep. Honestly, I was shocked because he had never done this before. The next morning, I triumphantly walked downstairs and related to my parents that Buster now loved me because he slept in my bed during the night. My parents looked at me inquisitively and sat me down at the breakfast table to let me know while they were outside the night before they had found Buster's body in the alley behind our house. They thought he had been harassed by a coyote, but he was dead, so he couldn't have slept in my bed that night. To this day, I like to think that Buster just wanted to say goodbye and thank me for trying to love him in the only way a child knew how. I was in first grade, hanging out at recess with a friend. He was shooting some hoops outside and I was playing DS sitting on the pavement. I remember him asking me if I could make a shot from halfway across the court. I told him he could try, but he probably wouldn't make it while looking at my DS. Suddenly my dad asks me what I mean, and when I look up, I'm sitting on my living room carpet talking to my dad and it's dark out. I was sitting in the same position, playing the same game, same level, and same exact spot in the level. Everything continued normally that night and I didn't tell anyone at the time, but looking back, it is really freaky. I thought it was a dream for the longest time, but thinking about it, it didn't really feel like a dream, and I don't really remember dreams that well. I was working at a hotel in Albuquerque, the graveyard shift. I had been talking to the security guard and he asked if he could get a ride home. So instead of waiting for 30 minutes for my shift to end, I just left and left a note for my boss that said I left early because my brother was stranded outside of town and needed me to get him. Total lie on my part, but I needed a good excuse to leave early. I dropped off the security guard at his place, then go home and go to sleep. A couple of hours of sleep and I wake up to my phone ringing. It was my brother. He tells me he is stranded outside of town and he needs me to go get him. I tell my brother the lie I told my boss and how much of coincidence his calling me is. He says that's not weird, he will show me what's weird when I get there. I get there and ask him what is weird. He puts his phone up to my ear and plays a message that he got when he woke up that morning. It's a voice that kinda sounded computerized but mostly just creepy sounding. It says, "You're stuck." Freaked us both out. Never figured out where the call came from. Strangest, creepiest thing that has ever happened to me in my life. I dreamt I was being choked and woke up to find my own hands around my throat. I once had a dream that I was fighting in a war and had just taken cover in a little trench when I felt something on my back. I looked behind me and there was a man sitting there tickling my back. I woke up and it turned out I was trying to scratch my back in my sleep. That is kind of adorable. When I was in uni, I lived by myself. It was a nice little studio unit behind a house in a fairly decent area. I would honestly think nothing of walking places at night. There was a 24-hour McDonald's and a 7-Eleven that I would walk to, often between 12 a.m. to 3 a.m. since I was a massive night owl. Well, one day after finishing an essay at about 2 in the morning, I decided I was hungry, but didn't really have anything easy to cook, so I decided to walk down to 7-Eleven and grab a pie or something. However, as soon as I opened the door, I was overcome by a suffocating feeling of fear. My heart started pounding, I started shaking the works. Telling myself that this was ridiculous, I walked out to the street with the intent to still go, but that was as far as I got. I was terrified for no reason that I could understand, but no less intensely despite that. I ran back inside and ate dry cereal. Later the next day, I heard about a group of drunk guys that were causing a havoc down near the intersection at the 7-Eleven. They had beaten up someone from my uni. Even though I can't explain it, I'm convinced something bad would have happened to me that night if I had ignored that feeling and gone away. This is the only type of paranormal type of stuff that I believe. It seems like somehow humans are able to perceive and sense relevant situations to them when it comes to extreme emotions and situations. So often you'll hear about people experiencing extreme and seemingly random negative emotions at the same time a loved one dies unexpectedly or other things like that. I'm not really sure what it means, but I feel like stuff like this is the last thread of hope that I have that just maybe death isn't as boring and frightening as, well, you're just dead and that's it. Granted, I still rationally believe it's like that, but situations like this are very interesting to me, since I can't quite realize how we'd be able to sense things like that in others that we care about or situations that would be relevant to us, especially across vast distances. My family owns a decent sized horse boarding facility, and when we first had it going, we used to do bat checks as a family. Bat check is just making sure all the lights and fans were off, as well as looking at the horses for injuries and if they had blankets during the winter. Well, we had just got back from eating out and it was just a moonless night during fall. As we stepped out of the truck, this large light gray mass stood up and took off lopping towards our pastures. It was about the size of a single cab pickup truck. It made no noises other than it hitting the ground as it ran. The only other proof that it was real to us was the horses that were turned out that night screamed and stampeded across the pasture it had jumped into. We did a double count of all horses that night and not a single one was missing. I still have yet to see it again, and I hope I never do, or at least there is some explanation for it. Pretty sure I lived in a haunted house for a while. Strange things. For one, I always felt like I was being watched in my room, and if I had the door open to the hallway, I would swear I'd see someone walk by out of the corner of my eye. We had 2 cats, and sometimes I'd be in my room sleeping, and then all of a sudden they would sit both up and stare at the door, and nothing I did would move them for a long time. This happened often. One day in my bathroom, the shelf that had my sister's beauty stuff randomly lose hold of all the items. The thing was, the shelf wasn't loose or hanging, and all the stuff had to bounce out of a 2-inch high lip into the sink. One time in the middle of the night, my sister's 100-plus-year-old dresser she got as a gift from our grandma just fell over. This thing weighed a ton and it was built like a tank. Sister said she heard the sound of someone pushing. Mom and sister used to yell at me for sneaking around the house, only I wasn't home or I was in my room. They said they saw a man in shadows that was about my height. One day we also ran into an old owner and my mom casually asked the lady if she had ever experienced anything in the house. The lady started crying and said no one believed her, but yes, she experienced a lot of stuff. I moved out around that time. I do not miss that place. I used to work doing maintenance at historic properties. There was a historic house museum I worked at when it wasn't open to the public. It was a part of a whole landmark site. It was a visitor center with offices, and the house was about half a mile up a dirt road in a wooded area. Sometimes I worked with a crew. There were a lot of times I was there alone. One winter day when it was really cloudy and dark, I was working alone to get ready to replace some electric work on the exterior of the house. I went inside and turned off the circuit to the whole property and I tested it. It was off. I locked the door and went outside to work. After about an hour, I got down from my ladder and started walking around the house, and then one of the lights inside the house turned on. I started to freak out but thought that maybe someone was playing a joke on me. I called the visitor center on my walkie-talkie and confirmed that the only other person who was working that day was still there and hadn't left, and that all the keys to the house were present and accounted for. That's when I freaked out and ran the half-mile up to the office. I made my coworker come back with me to check out what was going on, but when we got to the house the light was off again, but the bulb was still warm. All the doors were still locked and the circuit was still off. Still gives me shivers to this day. Lights turn on by itself in an old house when the electricity is off, which is literally impossible and super spooky. Make sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on more super interesting discussions. In the meantime, you can check out our other videos.